All right, everyone. Thank you all for coming. My name is Nicole Partridge, and I am actually the Director of Behavior Analyst Development here at Bierman. I've been with the company for about 8 years, and I am super excited to talk to you guys tonight about the Beginner's Guide to Social Skills. This is a big topic and it's something we work on pretty much every day at Bierman ABA. So I'm super excited for you guys to see it, and please feel free to ask questions. We'll dive in right now. All right. So everybody is on mute, but please feel free to participate, ask questions, type in the chat. Happy to answer anything having to do with this topic tonight. So for those of you who are not familiar with Bierman, Bierman Autism Centers is a place where young kids engage in play to learn foundational skills that they can build on, such as self-advocacy and communication. We recognize that every kid's success is unique, and our one-on-one approach allows us to drive progress using measurable outcomes while each kiddo is advancing on their own terms. So essentially what we do every single day is try to make learning fun for our kiddos, and we really want them to become lifelong learners and kiddos that just enjoy learning and playing. And that's how we feel like we can empower kiddos to be more independent. So what we're going to talk about today is a breakdown of what social skills actually encompasses. We are going to talk about how we at Bierman target social skills. And then I have a bunch of tips for how you can practice social skills at home. All right, let's dig in. So as I was thinking about what encompasses social skills and doing a little bit of research, I kind of found it really narrowed down to about 3 domains, if you will. So play behavior, connecting our emotions to behavior, and communication. So play, I think that kind of goes without saying, especially for our younger kiddos, right? Social skills are all about playtime. Connecting our emotions to behavior. So that really encompasses how do we interact with the world, and how do we interact with the people around us? How do we perceive people's emotions? Understand their nonverbal language, adjust our own behavior to what other people are doing in a scenario, and vice versa. And then communication, right? Like that goes without saying. So the words that we're actually saying and things that we're actually having, conversations about with others. So we're going to dive into each one of these topics. I went pretty deep into each one because I really wanted you to see day to day and like even hour to hour, little tiny skill to tiny skill, like how we actually build up social skills, like step by step. All right, so the first thing we're going to talk about is play behavior. So I put some ages on here, and I want us to really stipulate to everybody that these are approximations. These are going to greatly vary by kiddo. So I put some just general age ranges because I wanted to highlight that I am going to be talking about the early childhood and early elementary social skills. I'm not going to be diving into like those later skills because that's really what we focus on at Bierman, is that, 2 to 6 age range. So I kind of focus right there. So anyway, like I said, this is an approximation. It is different for every single kid. So for play, it's really basic. It starts with beginning, intermediate, and advanced. So we're going to talk about what each one of those actually looks like. I am a visual person, so I really was very specific about what pictures I chose for each piece of social skills. I really wanted to show you like this is actually what it would look like. And I think that really helps me visualize like, okay, if I were to set this up at home, how could I do it? So if we're talking about beginner play skills, we're talking about a few different things. We're talking about parallel play, we're talking about imitation, and we're talking about turn taking, very basic turn taking. So for parallel play, this is really a unique type of play because it doesn't actually involve interaction. So it is very much focused on just kiddos side by side, engaging in something very similar, but not interacting. That is not what that beginning play should be looking like. So you'll see in some of these pictures, you see kiddos playing next to each other, but not necessarily interacting. As far as imitation, so this is a big skill that we do try to really target at Bierman to, we call this skill a behavioral cusp, meaning like once you know how to watch someone and do what they do, whole other worlds open up for you. So just looking at somebody else and being like, oh, I'm going to try that. Like that's a huge skill in those beginner play skills. And then finally, turn taking. So when I'm talking about turn taking here, I'm not necessarily referring to following the rules of a game quite yet. I'm just really talking about that basic, like you go, I go. I'm going to wait while you go. You're going to wait while I go. Super basic. I see a question. Let me see. Will the slides be shared? I want to say yes. I think there'll be a recording.
Yes, we will share this afterwards.
Perfect. Okay. All right, so now let's move into some intermediate play skills. Again, take a peek at some of the pictures. There's a little bit more going on at the intermediate level. So this is where we might move into some sharing of toys. We might move into answering a question. We could potentially see some returning of greetings or initiating of greetings. We might join in others, and we also might invite others to join us. And we might follow rules of a game. Now I want to talk a little bit about each one of these. So sharing toys, this can be a really difficult skill for a lot of kiddos if they don't tolerate that sharing. And sometimes kiddos don't even tolerate it with their parents, let alone another kiddo. So this can be a really big skill that we work on day to day as well. So it can be offering or even accepting. If a peer might walk over and hand you something, and do you even want that from that peer? So this kind of goes both ways. Answering questions. So this is not a conversation. This has to do more with, can you just answer a basic question? Something along the lines of like, do you want to play? This has nothing to do with a conversation yet. There's no back and forth exchange here. This is just a very basic, like, do you answer when somebody asks you a question? Returning and initiating greetings. Now, again, this doesn't require a vocal. This could be something as simple as looking up when somebody walks into the room, or even orienting your body towards somebody when they walk in. It may be a wave. It might be just sort of an acknowledgement of some sort. It does not need to be vocal. Joining and inviting others. So if you've ever, taken your kiddo to a playground or to a library or some sort of group activity, and they sort of stand off to the side, and, that would be, they're sort of like mulling over, do I want to join in? Do I know how to join in? Do I walk over? Do I start running? Do I just sit there because I'm not into it? So this would be another skill in the intermediate play level, would be, can you join in a group? Or do you even have that ability to see somebody else and invite them to come and play? And that, again, might not even be vocal. It might just be like a simple, like, come here, or even grabbing somebody's hand. And then following the rules of a game. So again, like this, it does say a game, but I don't want you to think of Monopoly. I want you to think of something super simple like Zingo, right? Where there's a very basic turn taking, and there's like one rule, right? You have to match the card that you pick. That's it. So there's no strategy involved. It's super basic. Let me see.
We have another question.
Sure.
You mentioned that you were only going to focus on 2 to 6 age range. Is that the whole presentation? Or are we going to touch base with older children later on?
Yeah, this is the whole presentation. Yep, it is for that 2 to 6 age range. I did not go over that, no. Okay. All right. And then some advanced play skills. So this level is really looking at more cooperative play, some commenting, and then some self-directed play. So cooperative play is really where there's multiple kiddos that are focused on accomplishing one goal. So there is interaction happening at this level versus that parallel play where there really isn't. So I, have this picture of kiddos putting together something with Legos together. Commenting to peers. So again, there's a little bit more acknowledgement here that others are around, that they're available, that they are participating with me. So there might be a comment somewhere along the lines of like, I like to build with Legos. Blue is my favorite color. Let's climb the jungle gym. So something along those lines. Again, not really a conversation, but more just an acknowledgement of somebody else being there. And then self-directed play. So this is one of the really greatest skills that a kiddo can develop, in my opinion, meaning that they can entertain themselves when they're, when they're bored. So you'll see this little kiddo sitting, playing by himself, playing with some trains. And again, that doesn't need to be really super functional or even, sequential or independent. It really just needs to be like on your own. Like, can you find stuff to fill your time when you're on your own and your parents need to do something for a few minutes? So these would be categorized as more advanced.
Question. Can someone with autism have too much self-directed play?
Ooh, what a great question. In my opinion, my personal opinion and my professional opinion, I would say no. I think it's a question of what you see as too much. I think that it's probably what you're referring to is it's probably pretty common that kiddos on the spectrum often want to be by themselves and often will choose to, when given a choice, be by themselves, right? And play by themselves and sit by themselves. That is a pretty, well-known common symptom of the diagnosis. Now, I would argue that, part of what ABA does, and I'll get into this a little bit later, part of what we try to do is not really try to say like, oh, you can never be by yourself, because no, independent skills and having alone time is a really valuable skill. But part of what we try to do is just teach some other things that you can do in addition to that. So teach how to interact, teach how to have like some cooperative play, how to have some parallel play, and really start to build up some of those social muscles, if you will. But yeah, I think again, like it's an opinion question, really. And so it's sort of taking into consideration, how much time do you enjoy having by yourself? What do you, as the family, think is an appropriate amount of alone time? And that's something that, your behavior analyst and Bierman would be able to help you kind of figure out, like, what is that right amount, right? Because I think we can all agree that like no alone time would not be great, but all alone time is also not super great, right? We want somewhere in the middle. And I think we can definitely individualize that. I also think that it's probably going to be individualized per kiddo. Just in my own experience, when I'm thinking about myself and my own relationships, I can think of people in my life that do like to spend quite a bit, their homebodies. They like to be by themselves and they don't require all of that like social interaction. And then there's other people that, really thrive off of that and want to be around people. So I don't know that there's like a right answer, but I do see your question. I see why you're asking that. And I think as long as we can try to work on, hey, let's like add some more tools to your social basket and not just have like this a lot of alone time. I think that would be my goal. All right. Okay, so let's transition from play to connecting our emotions and our behavior. This is a little bit more complicated, as you can imagine, right? Emotions, there's a lot of emotions to feel in the world. And so there's a lot more nuance to this. And so I tried to keep it super, I guess I want to say the word like behavior analytic, and try to break it down into what that actually looks like and what are those teachable units. So I broke things down into, okay, first of all, do we understand emotions? And, having them yourself and then seeing them in other people. Then we moved into adjusting our behaviors. So understanding when you walk into a room and you're like, oh, what's going on here? Let me just adjust my behavior so that it's appropriate for the scenario. A good example of this would be walking into a library, right? And knowing that like, oh, I need to like be calm and have a quiet voice, right? So that would be an example of adjusting. Some flexibility. Again, this is hard for everyone. So flexibility comes into play as you get a little bit older, and then problem solving. So yeah, I mean, life is going to be tricky and hard, and there's going to be scenarios and things you don't want to do, but you got to do them. And so brings a little bit of problem solving into this. So I'll dive into what these mean in the next slides. All right, so understanding emotions. So this starts with identifying likes and dislikes, right? So can you even state or say no thank you to things that you do or don't like, right? So I like cereal and I don't like, I don't know, eggs, right? So can you, at this level and this age range, can you state those things or can you communicate those things to the people around you? And so I kind of use this picture of the kiddos digging in the dirt and then other kiddos behind them, utilizing, I think it might be bubbles. I'm not entirely sure from what I could see, but just knowing like that everybody has different preferences. Um, the next piece would be identifying emotions of others and identifying the emotions of yourself, right? So can you recognize when others are feeling different emotions? Can you recognize those emotions in yourself? Are you able to label them? Are you able to actually say like, I'm mad or I'm sad? And can you recognize when other people feel that way too? Um, Using our senses to understand feelings is another big piece that we try to teach, as well as understanding you can see things. I see an airplane, like you can smell something. Like, I smell trash. I can taste the ice cream, so understanding that those things, that those senses are connected. So like, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. So understanding how to communicate those wants and needs and preferences to others in the world. And then differentiating tone of voice. So this it looks like understanding a joke or sarcasm or a more firm tone versus a more silly tone. And so again, how do you understand those in the world? Do these are these things that stand out to you, or do we need to start teaching these and breaking these down so that we can identify what they are and label them in ourselves and then label them on others, so we can start to understand why people do the things that they do and why they say the things they say and what those things mean and how they affect us. Next, it would be adjusting our behavior, right? So a lot of this, is sometimes commonly referred to as like emotional regulation, right? So how do we adjust our own behavior based on what happens in the world? So using coping strategies when upset, right? So it's pretty common. Most toddlers have meltdowns, right? Like have tantrums. Like this is really common, right? Because they're still learning how to develop their regulation and their emotional regulation of how do they handle disappointment and how do they handle being sad and mad, right? So as as we learn these skills and develop, we start to learn how to use coping skills when you're upset. Some of the things that we might even target when we might be in ABA therapy at Bierman is tolerating other people's choices, tolerating losing, and tolerating not being first. All really, really important skills, right? So we actually do target these specific things. We actually contrive scenarios where where kiddos might have to face these scenarios in a very small and controlled way. So, for example, if I wanted to practice tolerating losing for a kiddo who really struggles with not winning a game, I might start with playing a very simple, easy game that they know how to play, something like tic-tac-toe or Zingo or something very, very simple. And I would start with having them win all the time and just really, giving them that experience, right? And then I might start with maybe 1 out of 10 games, I might win myself and have them have to tolerate sitting with that feeling and being okay. And then really giving them a ton of praise for, not engaging in a meltdown or a tantrum. So a lot of these things really help practice in a really safe and small and tiny way that we can build on, hopefully, and learning how to deal with our emotions and just deal with disappointment and deal with things that sometimes this is just life, right? So super important skills to learn how to kind of be out in the world. All right. So the next thing is flexibility, and this one's really tricky. So tolerating making mistakes, tolerating when things change, tolerating when things are hard, and basically this last one does not tell when there's a small thing, essentially like not tattletaling over every single thing in life. So again, like this is building on those tolerating skills we talked about in the last slide. So tolerating making mistakes, like again, part of life, like something we have to learn how to handle, tolerating when things change, right? Like sometimes the library's closed, sometimes it's raining and you can't go outside to play. Tolerating when things are hard, everything is not going to be easy. There's going to be some things you have to work at and practice, and having that endurance and stamina to get back up and try it again. And then tolerating when things are, not needed to be, a huge like, oh, so-and-so did this, so-and-so didn't do the right thing, so-and-so did this, I didn't do this, so a lot of that kind of, I would call it like tattling behavior. So flexibility again is another big skill as you're kind of growing and advancing through developing your social skills. And then the final phase of that, adjusting your behavior to other people and to scenarios around you. So problem solving. This is a big one, pretty complicated in terms of like, how do you go about teaching this? But we would start typically with identifying problems and solutions. So could you, as a kiddo, either look at a picture or observe a scenario happening in life and understand like, okay, what is the problem here? Can I even just tell you by looking what is the issue? So something really simple might be a picture of a kiddo with holding an ice cream cone and the ice cream itself is on the floor. And I might say, oh gosh, like what's the problem in this picture? And could the kiddo look at that picture and say like, oh, they lost their ice cream. And then I might tie that to an emotion. And I might say, oh, how do you think that makes that kiddo feel? Um, and then I might tie that to a solution. Oh, what do you think you could do if you were sad because your ice cream fell, right? Oh, I could like go ask for another one. I could get an adult to help me. I could, have a different snack. So all of that is social skills. That's how you interact with the world, and you sort of piece all of those things together. And this is what we do every day at Bierman. So negotiating, compromising, right? So this looks like, hey, the iPad's going to be all done. It's time for bed. Oh, can I just have 1 more minute? Negotiating and compromising, very important skill, right? Accepting consequences. So, well, no, you can't have any more minutes. It's time for bed. So accepting that like sometimes it just is, you can't have everything you want all the time. And then understanding the concept of fair and unfair, right? So this would be something like, oh, Susie got extra recess and I didn't because Susie, finished her work and I didn't. So understanding that like universal rules can't apply all the time. There's going to be certain scenarios and contexts that are going to vary. And like, again, being okay with that. So this all really amounts to like, how do we adjust our behavior based on what's happening around us? Okay, we are going to move on to communication skills. So this is what I think people typically think about when they think about social skills. Like, what does it actually mean? Can you socialize and talk to people? So this also really spans a huge age range, and it does have quite a few things and nuances that go into it. And I think, I think if you're getting anything out of this presentation, it's that there's a lot that goes into social skills. And so it's really crucial that we break everything down into teeny tiny pieces and kind of build on all of them. So let's talk about what these 4 things mean inside of our communication umbrella. So joint attention. So joint attention, I will say, is one of my absolute favorite topics. I love to talk about joint attention. And I'll tell you why. Joint attention is in everything we do, everything. So it starts when you're super, super, super little. And it really just comes down to like, how much do you share an experience with somebody around you? So do you approach others? Do you make eye contact? Do you gain attention in some way? And do you reciprocate what other people are doing? So joint attention really looks like, if I had to break it down into one word, it's really just eye contact. Like, are you in it with me with this experience? Something as simple as looking at an airplane. That's the most common example that I typically give. It's like, oh, look at the airplane. And that other person looks with you. That's it. It's so, so, so simple. And it can be taught, which is really great. I love teaching joint attention skills to kiddos on the spectrum. Okay, let's see.
Oh, sorry. Somebody asked again if these would be available afterwards, and yes, you'll receive an email with the slides and the recording in a day or 2. Sorry, Nicole.
Yeah, that's okay. Great. Okay, so approaching others. So this can really just look like a reach. This can look like climbing into somebody's lap. This can look like turning towards someone. This can just look like, hey, I want to be around you. That's really all it comes down to. Eye contact, that's pretty self-explanatory. Gaining attention. So trying to gain somebody else's attention by, again, like looking at them, reaching for them, coming toward them. Or even like this little person is doing with their little stethoscope and glasses on, like, hey, look at me, this is pretty funny. I just thought that was the cutest picture. Reading a book together, looking when somebody's making a funny noise or a funny face. This is all pre social skills. It's just, am I involved with the people around me? And again, we can teach this. So I will get into that in a later part of the presentation too. Okay, next part is conversation. So this is where we get into actually what most people think about with communication and social skills, right? Like, can you have a conversation with someone? So asking questions, making comments, staying on topic, and listening when others talk, right? So pretty basic. Can you ask questions of other people? Can you make comments if somebody asks you a question and you're in a back and forth conversation? Do you stay on topic, or are you kind of all over the place and just, kind of spewing non sequiturs? And then do you listen when others talk to you, right? Like, is it one-sided or is it a back and forth? Again, we can break down all of this into tiny steps and teach it. Okay. Nonverbal. So this is another huge piece of communication, as I'm sure you all know, that what we're saying nonverbally is almost as important as what we're actually saying verbally. So having appropriate proximity, using correct orientation, being aware of body language and facial expressions, and following and using gestures. So appropriate proximity, I mean, I think that's pretty self-explanatory, right? So making sure that you're not doing like super close talking, making sure that you're not shouting across the room, and making sure that you're appropriately distanced for the situation. Having that correct orientation, right? So oriented toward the speaker, with eye contact. And again, something that can be uncomfortable, but something that we can also teach and practice. Being aware of body language and facial expressions. So like the kiddos at the top here with both of them have their arms crossed, right? So it seems like they're not really in a friendly conversation, right? And we know that because of their body language, right? So it's being able to look at the scenario, look at the picture, and pick up on those things, and then adjust your behavior accordingly. Um, Facial expressions, right? So looking at what is this person who I'm talking to, what does their facial expression look like? And is it in tune with mine or is it not? Should I ask them if they're okay? Um, and then following and using gestures. So I think gestures are one of those things that we don't realize that we use all day long. I'm doing it right now. I'm talking with my hands. But really just that's simple communication, right? Like, I don't know, come here, or shh, quiet, right? Like all super, super, um, it just nonverbal, but convey everything you need to convey in those simple gestures. So using gestures as well as being able to follow a gesture would be part of this nonverbal skill. Okay, niceties. So I like this piece because it does illustrate that these niceties do come a lot later. Um, in my opinion, my personal opinion, as well as my like professional opinion, I don't typically jump in and try to teach um the concepts of please and thank you right off the bat for a new learner. I really try to save that for later because it's very abstract. So that's why I like to put niceties sort of at the end of like this sequence. So apologizing appropriately. So, oh, sorry, stepped on your toe. Excuse me, I bumped into you, that type of thing. Asking for help or a favor. Hey, can you grab that for me? Can I have some help? Can you open this? Interrupting appropriately, being able to say, excuse me, being able to wait your turn to talk, and then using that please and thank you and no thank you. So these are what I like to call like nice to have. Like they're not super necessary if you're really just trying to work on those basic social skills, but they're nice to have down the road. We'll get to them. All right. So this part is I wanted to pause and just see if anybody had questions, because I'm going to jump into just sort of what ABA therapy would actually, how we would actually target these things. But I wanted to see if anybody had questions. It's a lot because social skills really encompasses a lot. And if you think about your own life and you think about, wow, like my social skills when I was 5, my social skills when I was 12, my social skills at 20, right? Like very different. There's so much nuance between then and now. So I like to kind of dive in and see like, okay, there really is a lot that goes into social skills. So um, our job is to really start where the kiddo is at and just build on it. All right. Okay, so I was thinking about things that parents have told me over the years that can be difficult when your kiddo just really does not have a lot of those play skills. And I thought we could talk about what those are, as well as like some ways that ABA can really help and ways that you guys can target things at home that can just be a really nice starting point. So obviously, like you might not have peers to practice with, right? Like it's really difficult to have an actual peer who you can use as a model or use at a peer who's, around the same age range that can be patient enough to practice, right? That might be hard to come by. The peer might be easily frustrated because they don't really know why they're having to practice the skill over and over again, right? It might be difficult to attend family gatherings. It might be difficult to arrange play dates. And so I wanted to acknowledge that, there's a whole host of things that might be difficult if your kiddo is really struggling with their social skills. And so I wanted to talk through like, what can we do? Like, where do we start? What can we do? So, one of the things that ABA really focuses on is we can teach play and social skills. Like we can teach that, no problem. So what we're going to try to do is replace those like non-social behaviors with more adaptive and socially significant skills. And one of the things that your BCBA or, the person that you're interacting with at Bierman, if you're already at Bierman, would be to sort of discuss with you and your family values around like, what does social look like to you? What do you do as a family? What would you like to do as a family? What do your social habits look like? And so they can get an idea of like, okay, great, like let's try to get there. So overall, though, I would say what we try to do is increase social opportunities with peers, decrease reliance on screens, right? Like ton of screen time, I'm sure. I mean, that's for any kid really, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just that like, we would love to put some more tools in the tool basket, right? Like not just having screens, but having other things to do and engage in. More time with potentially with siblings, which would be amazing. And then increasing that independent playtime, which would be really nice, which would, if you can increase it to like a functional or just something more independent, that'd also be great. So this is kind of what, again, these are general goals. They're going to be individualized based on what the needs of your family are, but this is sort of what we would kind of start with. And then I wanted to touch on the couple of ways that we would go about doing this. If you're familiar with ABA at all, one of the techniques that you might hear that we would use would be shaping or prompting. And really what this means is we are just taking really, really small steps and providing teaching and prompting along the way so that there's slower changes and it's much easier for learners to adapt rather than sort of like jumping right in and saying, okay, do it, go do it, right? It's much more of a progression. Excuse me, this helps us avoid setbacks and it helps us avoid maybe some emotional responding or some challenging behaviors that might occur if we kind of push too hard. So we really like to go step by step and shape things through. So one of those examples might be, let's say we were trying to shape a behavior of greetings, right? Let's say we were like, we really want to focus on greetings. It would be so great if when I came home from work, my kiddo could say hello or wave or even look up, right? So we would start with something super basic. We might even just start with like them just like turning their head at a sound or the door opening. And then we would build from there. So that's what shaping means. It just means starting really, really small and achievable and then building on it. And we might stay at that step for a couple days, a week, and then we might add a new requirement. So, okay, so you turn your head now when somebody walks in the door. Can you make eye contact now, right? So then we would require a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. That's what shaping means. Reinforcement. So ABA is pretty big on reinforcement. We want to make sure that we are providing reinforcement to our kiddos for all the hard work that they're doing every single day. And so that reinforcement can look different for every single kid, right? What you like versus what I like is going to be different just based on our preferences. We're different people, right? Like I really love ice cream. So if you're going to reinforce me, I'll take some ice cream. But somebody else might not feel that way. And they might be like, yeah, I'm good with ice cream. I'll take cookies, right? Somebody else might say like, yeah, I'm not like a big sweets person. I would love some screen time though. So I'm going to need you to reinforce me with my iPad. Somebody else might say, yeah, I'm not really into screens, but I really love going on the trampoline. So great, let's do that. Let's reinforce you with what is actually going to make you happy. So that's another thing that we do is really try to focus on like, okay, what does this kiddo really like? And how can we make sure that we're giving them that in addition to pairing ourselves with that reinforcer? So, as part of our literature and our like evidence-based practices. So reinforcement's the most powerful way to change behavior. It works quickly. We can start really small and you can build momentum with small changes. So again, your reinforcement can look like a million different things. It can be tickles, it can be spins, it can be verbal praise, just like great job. It can be high fives. It can be a teeny tiny chocolate chip. It could be iPad time. It could be hide and seek. It can be anything at all that floats your boat. Okay, so I thought it might be cool to look at some social skills goals. And for those of you who are not familiar with Bierman and sort of we write treatment plans and we write those treatment plans every 6 months. It's essentially what it sounds like. It's a plan to keep us on track for like where we're going. What are we trying to accomplish in this 6-month time period? And so we write those very specific goals that are very specific to the client. And I thought we would kind of just go through a few different ones that would be related to social skills. And they can look very, very different depending on where you're at and what you're trying to get to. So some examples here include Dylan will engage in parallel play with a peer for 1 minute across 4 different activities. Cameron will follow 5 different directions when presented during a peer interaction activity with 2 other peers. Cody will respond to a command from a peer across 3 different peers. So a lot of this is very ABA specific wording, but I'll tell you essentially what those mean, right? So the first one is parallel play. We talked about that at the beginning. So really what this goal is looking at is like, can this kiddo just like play next to another kiddo for a minute across like 4 different things? And we would practice that. We would set up those opportunities. The second one is following directions presented during a peer interaction activity. So this is what you would typically think of as like a typical school circle time or a center time, where kiddos are sitting together, maybe listening to a story or doing the calendar or singing a song. And what we're trying to accomplish here is, can the kiddo in this environment with other kiddos around answer questions? Can they come up and put the date on the calendar? Can they answer a question about what's going on in the story, right? So that's a very different skill than like sitting one-on-one, just with your, with your therapist or with a parent. The last one is responding to a command, which is also known as a request from a peer. So this is just having the kiddo, if a peer comes over and says, hey, you want to play? The kiddo will say, yeah, or they'll just get up and go play. All right, I wanted to give you a lot of examples of different types of social skills because, again, there's so many ways we can target this and so many pieces to social skills. So Ella will respond to a greeting from a peer across 3 different peers. Remy will engage in back and forth play with an adult for 3 different activities and 6 turns. Micah will engage in imaginative play by emitting 2 contextually appropriate vocalizations across 2 play schemes. So lots of fancy words, but essentially what the first one means is Ella will respond to a greeting from a peer. So 3 different peers. Again, we would practice these opportunities and respond to a greeting. So by saying hi, by looking, making eye contact, or maybe by waving. Engaging in back and forth play. So super simple, could be something as simple as like tossing a ball back and forth, could be rolling a car back and forth. And doing at least 6 turns, right? Again, so this is very specific because we want to break it down into a very, very small piece and build upon it. And then imaginative play, right? So this would look like a kiddo playing at the kitchen, to play kitchen, and maybe putting something in the oven and saying like pizza cook, or filling up a pretend teacup and saying like yummy drink, something along those lines. All right, couple more examples. Kayla will emit 3 different gestures to communicate with others. Cole will initiate bids for joint attention with at least 1 peer across 2 activities. And Michael will respond appropriately to 3 examples of nonverbal body language in a contrived setting. So Kayla emitting gestures to communicate. Again, that's really simple. It's just what we talked about earlier, which is, can you, oh, come here, 1 second, I don't know. So being able to utilize those gestures in the correct situation. Again, we would contrive those opportunities, whether with a therapist or with other peers at the center, to try to elicit and practice those things and then reinforce them. Initiating bids for joint attention. So joint attention is, remember what we talked about, sharing an experience. So something as simple as just eye contact. And initiating bids, meaning like the kiddo is the person who's initiating to the peer rather than responding. And then Michael responding to nonverbal body language. So if I were to say to Michael, or not say, if I were to do this to Michael, would he know what I'm trying to convey? And could he explain that and label it? Oh, you're thinking about something. I know that because you put your hand up to your mouth or your chin. So something like that. Okay. So I thought, again, like I always try to say to parents that I meet with, where are we at now? What do you want to start with? What's important to your family, right? And then think about a goal and think about starting small and thinking about it being realistic, right? Because you want to start small so you can see the progress and build upon it, right? So it can be anything from imitating a simple action, remaining in the room when you sit next to them if they don't tolerate you watching them play, looking at you when you call their name, sitting next to a sibling while they're playing blocks separately, taking turns with a toy, saying hello, asking if somebody's okay when they look upset, commenting to a peer or a friend that they like their truck, or coming to a friend when they do a gesture of come here. So there's so many different ways to target this. And I really just like to emphasize to families, like, we can start anywhere, we can start small, we can start with something that you even see happening at home, and then we can build on it. Okay, so I also put together a bunch of slides that just really can try to get the juices flowing about, like, what do I have at home that I can do right now, tomorrow? And how do I even start? Where do I start? What do I even do? So I put together a few slides for us to talk about. So, okay, so this is essentially what I kind of broke it down into. So number one, setting up the environment, right? So setting it up for success. And that's going to look different for everyone, right? Like, it could be that you designate a place, you designate an area, you designate a time, right? Like, just thinking about, like, start to think about, like, okay, where would the best place for this practicing social skills happen? And then we're going to do some pairing. So pairing is our bread and butter at ABA. This is what we do every single day. We pair. And pairing means that you're actually pairing yourself with your kiddo's reinforcers, right? So a lot of times kids on the spectrum, they might value or seem to value tangible items or alone time or things that, aren't typical, that we see every day, right? They might have things that are more reinforcing than us. And so one of the big things that we do right off the bat and maintain over time when we're with your kiddos is we pair. We try to make sure that we are doing the fun thing that they're doing with them, and that the activity that they want to engage in is better because we are there. So that might look like, oh, maybe your kiddo likes to swing. Well, then guess what? Like, you're going to be in charge of that swing, and you're going to be the one pushing, and you're going to be the one controlling how fast they're going and how much fun they're having, and if they're getting tickles, and if there's, if there's music involved, anything, right? So, like, you're pairing yourself with reinforcement. Pausing. So this is critical. This is super simple. You do not need any special talents or like items to pair and pause, right? So if you find something your kiddo really loves and you're involved in it, do it, pause, wait for them to look at you, and then do it some more. So that's pair, pause, reinforce. We do that all day long. So I just like to say, like, that is super easy to do. You do not need any materials to do that. So that's really where I start with, is my kiddo like set up for success? Do I know what their reinforcers are? Do I understand how I can like be part of that? And it might take some time to develop that and sort of figure that out. Like, what is it that they like the best and how can I be part of it? That's sometimes the trick, right? Is figuring that out. Let me see if I'm forgetting anything on this slide. I don't think so. Okay, so we're going to dive into these a little bit more too. Okay, so there's a couple of things that I want to talk through when you're thinking about your own time, your own space, your own house, and potentially trying to incorporate this into your routine. So setting up a routine, setting up a space, eliminating distractions, and rotating toys. So thinking about, again, I don't think you need to start with something super long. I think if you can find 5 or 10 minutes a day, I think that is a great place to start. You don't need a whole hour. You don't need a whole day. You just need to commit to 5-10 minutes a day. Like, let's just work on this. And then find a spot, right? So it can be anywhere. Like, it can be in a closet. It can be, in the kitchen. It can be in the bath. It can be anywhere. It doesn't need to be at a table. It doesn't need to be in a very specific place. It just can be anywhere that you can say, like, this is our place. This is what we're doing. We're going to do it right here. Limiting distractions, right? So This would be a good time if you do have siblings in the house. Hey, you know what? You guys can watch TV for 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to work on, so-and-so and I are going to do X, Y, and Z for 5 minutes. Like, you guys go do your own thing. Give them a snack, do something. And then rotate toys. So this is something I feel is a really quick fix. If you're like, well, I'm not buying a whole new set of toys to like practice social skills. No, don't. But what I would suggest is like looking at your toys and looking at the materials you have at home and just throwing some of them into a closet. And they're gonna become sort of deprived, right? Like they're gonna become like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this toy. And then when you take it out a couple weeks later, I love this toy. So, and it also is going to like declutter a little bit, right? And to get you to focus on like, here, let's just focus on like these 2 or 3 toys that will help us. These are going to be the props that we're going to use to focus on our social skills. So I always recommend this, especially like just, I don't know, I think it's just the freshness sometimes really just helps. So those are my first 4 suggestions. Okay, next, I think this is also really crucial and really hard. Being a parent myself, it's really difficult to not do this, but I try to do this. So comment, but don't place demands, right? So like, I think this is such a parenting thing where you're just like, everything you see is like, don't do that, do this, pick up your clothes, like don't run down the hall. But I think taking this 5 to 10 minutes of space with your kiddo, if you're going to practice at home, and just saying to yourself, like, I have to turn off my parent brain. I can't be giving a demand every 5 seconds, right? So you're going to turn off that part of your brain and you're going to just play. You're not going to place demands. You're going to comment. You might comment on things. You might talk and you might narrate, but you're not going to place demands. Super, super hard. I challenge you. Then you're going to try to control the situation, right? So like, obviously, if there's a safety concern, you're not going to just be like, yeah, let's jump off the top rope. No, we're going to control the situation. We're going to control for safety. But as much as you can, try to be fun. Next is you're going to model, imitate, and exaggerate, right? So depending on where your kiddo's at, you're just going to model. You're going to practice. You're going to model. You're going to imitate them, right? Because they might not have the skills yet to actually watch you and imitate you. So you're going to do the flip thing. You're going to watch them and imitate them. And then hopefully they'll start to see like, oh, they're doing what I'm doing. What the, you're going to exaggerate, and that might be actions, right? Or it might be vocals. And then you're going to use playful obstruction. I love this word. And I think it's really neat. It's essentially being really, really silly. Playful obstruction. So it might be that there's a toy that your kiddo is really into and it has multiple parts, and you're going to have all those parts and they're going to have one part, and you're going to be like, go ahead, play. And they're going to be like, but you have all the pieces, right? And that's playful obstruction. You being like, yep, I've got it. And then you can zoom it to them or interact with them in a fun way. I'm trying to think of another example. So playful obstruction might be like they're trying to play with trucks or trains, and they're, kind of going back and forth, and you just lay down right in the road and you're like, what? Oh, what? Why are you crashing into me? Right? Just to get, again, your goal is to try to get that interaction, to really get them to see like, oh, like this is way more fun when somebody else is playing with me. Let's see. Copying and exaggerating is also super fun. So, just copying any of their like noises, any of their movements, that type of thing. Exaggerating. So there might be a dolly or an animal figurine and the figurine falls down. And you really go over the top, really sell it like, oh my God, ouch, oh my gosh, you hurt me, our baby fell, oh my God, we gotta bring her to the hospital, so something along those lines. Let's see. Let me see if there's anything else. Oh yeah, I want to go. Yeah. I'll say one more thing about playful obstruction. One other example I have is doing things that don't make sense or like are wrong. So like putting on trying to put on a tiny shoe on your foot, or like putting on a tiny shirt over your head. So things like that. So try to do things that are like outside of the typical way that things would be played, so that you can kind of get that like hook of like, oh, what are they doing? What are they up to? I want to be involved. The next thing I did was sort of lay out some play expansions. So they're kind of exactly what you think they would be. So they're taking some like regular play and expanding on it. And I just like to do this because I think it's nice to have a list of like, okay, so I have some blocks, like what can I do with them? Or like I guess we could do water play, but like with like how, like what could be more creative or more fun. So I kind of wanted to list out a bunch of things that we do with our kiddos and that we try to rotate through to kind of just keep it fresh and keep it creative. I'm not going to read through all of these, but I did want to point out that like I have a lot of ideas that you can, take, try, see what you think. Some of them might work, some of them will be flops, but at least, just to kind of get those juices flowing. And then I wanted to put out on here some conversation examples, like some expansion of conversation too. So things that you can try if your kiddo is at this level. So just some simple things that can be, again, they're just a little bit more creative than like, let's just sit down and have a conversation, right? Like they're a little bit more creative, more fun. And then some expansion of joint attention. As I told you, I'm a huge joint attention person. It's one of my most favorite things to teach kiddos, and anyone can do it. It's super, super fun, but really all it comes down to is that eye contact. And so I have a bunch of different ways that we do this. And so I listed them out for you guys if you wanted to try them. And I think that's it. Oh my gosh, look at that time. Amazing. Okay. Does anyone have any questions? I also want to just restate, like everything on here is going to vary based on your kiddo. It's all going to vary on preference. It's all going to vary on your values and your social, like what your, what your family, does day to day and what your expectations are. And so those are all things you would talk through with your behavior analyst. But I hope that I gave you some at least examples and sort of like places to start thinking about like, how can I tackle this? Where do I start? And yeah, I hope you enjoyed talking about social skills with me. I think that's it. Just some references that I utilize that I highly recommend.
It looks like we have a question that did just come through. Working on greetings, how do you get a kiddo to just say hello?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so working on greetings. So I think the first question is like, are they, what do they do currently, right? Like where are they at? Like what's their baseline? Like where do they even look when somebody says hello? Do they wave when somebody says hello? Do they have words? Do they know how to say hello? And then start from there, right? So it would really depend on like where you're at and how you would get there. But I would say like one of the main things that if you're just looking at straight, like, okay, I walk in, I say hello, my kid knows how to say hello, but they don't say hello to me. If that's sort of the scenario you're talking about, it really does come down to like, does the kiddo understand that social situation, right? Like we talked about adjusting your behavior and your emotions and connecting those two, right? Do they understand that like that is the requirement? Are they reinforced by it? Are they like, oh my gosh, this is so great, I would love to say hello to you? Like, have we taught them that skill explicitly? My suggestion, and not knowing this kiddo, would be to start really small, come in the door, get down on the floor or close to them, make sure you have their attention and say hi really clearly. And if you can, I would have a reinforcer available, so that even if they just like look at you, or if they like look or even just kind of mumble something in response, I would try to reinforce that with something that your child is really into, and then you could build from there. But that's a good question. I think it's it can be really difficult if your kiddo, you walk in and you're just like, why won't you say hi to me? Seems like a very simple thing, right? But like my challenge to you would be like, do they know that that's the expectation, right? Have we reinforced them? Like, have we explicitly taught it, right? And again, like, this is like, meeting your kiddo where they're at. Like, will they even make eye contact? If they do, great, start reinforcing that. Then we can work on building up to like a wave, and then maybe a hey, and maybe a hug, right? Like, so I think that's really what ABA does, is it looks at like, okay, where are you? Let's meet you there. And then let's build a map to get to where you want to be, right? Like, what's the next step developmentally? Where do parents want to be? What are their goals? What are your goals? And like, let's build on them. So I know that doesn't like answer specifically like that question, but it really does depend on like, where are they at? And then how could we build on it? And how could we teach and like use that reinforcement and shaping to get closer and closer to just saying hi.
Awesome. That looks like that was our last question. Thank you, everyone. And we will send you this recording shortly, but thanks, Nicole.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for coming. It was a pleasure. See you all later.